Crazy stuff, but look, let's move on because they say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So we were very flattered this week to see the Sydney Morning Herald's defence investigation, Red Alert. Red Alert, war risk exposed. Australia faces, within 3 years, the real prospect of a war with China that could involve a direct attack on our mainland. But Australia's Defence Force is woefully unprepared. And this editorial, of course, are we prepared for war? The public has a right to know. Now, why does that seem so familiar?
You believe it will be inevitable that there will be forced conflict?
We've got a significantly increased defence.
A once-in-a-generation look at whether our ADF is fit for purpose. Are we ready for war?
We are acting as quickly as we can.
I pray that they will get it right.
That's right. The 9 newspapers didn't even wait a full month to rip off our defence investigation, which even carried a near identical headline to that editorial, Are We Ready for War? But credit where credit is due. It was a good read. And journalists Peter Harcher and Matthew Knott raised important questions about how poorly equipped our military is to deal with conflict. But one prominent Labor figure was furious about the coverage. The Australian Sophie Elsworth, who joins us here tonight, reported former Prime Minister Paul Keating was terribly upset at the newspaper. Today's Sydney Morning Herald and Age front page stories on Australia's supposed war risk with China represents the most egregious and provocative news presentation of any newspaper I have witnessed in over 50 years of active public life, Mr. Keating said in a statement. What a ludicrous response to legitimate journalism. Now, Labor has an image issue with the perception that it does not take the China threat seriously. These comments by Keating will do nothing to disarm those concerns. Sophie, great article. What did you make of Keating's comments and his intervention in this issue?
Well, Jack, I thought it was a very interesting week because he hit out at them multiple times over their reporting on this Red Alert series. But he said, as you read out in that statement, along the lines of it was some of the most irresponsible journalism in 50 years that he'd seen, or to that effect. I thought that was an overreaction, to be quite frank. This is an issue that is definitely on the forefront of the media in Australia and has been for many years. The issue he also had was with the panel that the journalists used in these series of stories of 5 experts from various fields. And Mr. Keating hit out at the panellists and said most of them were anti-China. So he had quite a few issues with these stories, but I did think it was an overreaction from him. And as you would expect, 9 newspapers has defended their journalism and stood by it.
Daisy, do you think Labor has an issue with the perception that it is soft on China, or at the very least doesn't take it seriously?
I think it really does. And it's interesting the contrast with Scott Morrison, who was quite bullish in his rhetoric on China a couple of years ago, which I wholeheartedly supported. I thought it was great that he was really sticking up to them. Some people in the community might have found that off-putting, but at least it really gave the impression that the Liberal Party knew what the threat was and was prepared to stand up to it. At least they were prepared to stand up to it until China decided that mass lockdowns were a good idea to manage COVID. And then like a leaf, Scott Morrison fell over when it really mattered, but still the initial rhetoric was good. So I really do think Labor possibly does have a problem. I liked the Sydney Morning Herald splash a lot. It was funny though, I was chatting to people in the studio on Monday night before the front page. I had to talk about it and someone said, you know what, that really looks like a News Corp front page rather than a Sydney Morning Herald front page. But
I wonder why.
It really was a good read.